Now, one of the more promising of all the subjects is the question you ask, which is, what can we do from space about understanding what's happening to our Earth and to the climate? So we are going to put up a series of great observatories, in addition to what we already have, that is going to give us a 3D precise understanding of things that are happening to the water, to the land, to the ice, and to the atmosphere. And it's all going to be presented in what we're calling the Earth Information Center. And we have a film that we want to show you about the Earth Information Center. Roll the tape.
For more than 50 years, NASA has been collecting and providing data on Earth's land, water, ice, and atmosphere. Now, a new era of Earth science has begun. Together with international partners, NASA will launch the SWAT mission to provide the first ever global survey of Earth's surface water, the oceans, lakes, and rivers that affect all of us. But we also need to understand our planet as a complex whole. That's why NASA will launch a fleet of state-of-the-art satellites forming the Earth System Observatory, which will create a comprehensive 4D view of Earth, from bedrock to atmosphere like never before. The Earth System Observatory will arm us with crucial data to help us address climate change and protect our communities. But how do we get this critical information to the people who need it? Introducing the Earth Information Center. NASA, working with our federal partners, will equip decision makers with the information they need to mitigate, adapt, and respond to climate change. We will create a greenhouse gas monitoring system and make data about our changing planet accessible to those who need it most. New satellites observing in the sky, and an information center here on Earth, protecting our planet for the next generation.
That's quite impressive. Yeah, okay. And I noticed the farmer who had the tablet in that video doing their work with the assistance of the satellite data. So thank you for that, Bill.
We've been talking with folks, of course, around the country about what you all are doing. Can you share, for those who have not been on the International Space Station, how does it impact your view of Earth when you've had that experience? Does it change your view of Earth and your perception of who we are, who live on Earth?
Oh man, that's a great question, and I think it's something that we all share up here. You know, one of the unique perspectives that we have here is to see Earth in its entirety. You know, we orbit the Earth, we see 16 sunrises and sunsets every day, and we look down and we see a world with no borders. We see and work with people that are, you know, from all different backgrounds and things like that. And so our perspective up here is that we're all part of one team. We all work towards one common purpose, and that when we set our minds towards those kinds of goals, we can accomplish anything. So it is really phenomenal to be up here, and it is great looking down on the Earth. You do realize how fragile it is and how much we have to take care of it as well. And so it is just really a privilege to be up here, and just really an honor.
lessons for all of us. We're all in this together, aren't we? But you can see that when you're in space, that we on Earth are all in this together. And I appreciate your point about the fragility of this beautiful Earth of ours and the need, therefore, to take care of it. Tell us what you are learning on the space station that is helping us be smarter around how we take care of Earth.
We are honored and privileged to be able to use the International Space Station as a test bed and as a laboratory to be able to learn lessons that we can apply to Earth. So things like learning how to grow plants without soil and being able to use that back on Earth to help with food security. Thinking about learning about how cells age, immune cells age while we're up here, and thinking about how we can help with immune cell aging back on Earth. There's so many different aspects of what we do up here that can be applied to making Earth a better place.
And everything you spoke of is about life, isn't it? And what we can do through food, through the growth of agriculture that feeds the species and the population, but also what we can do to improve the condition of human life in terms of sickness, and what we can do and discover in terms of treatment. That really is so exciting.
Is it conspiracy? Is it comedy? Is it tragedy? Or is it simply humanism coming to its natural end? So, I wonder, has the Vice President of the United States succeeded in generating so much excitement for the next wave of technocratic marvels from NASA that people are gathering outside her residence, hoping to be first in line for some of these new medicines developed from watching immune cells age in zero gravity? Perhaps they're hoping to taste some of these revolutionary new foods that are grown here on Earth without using soil, like they've been working on up in low Earth orbit for 2 or 3 decades. Obviously, everybody knows those are not the reasons people are gathered outside the D.C. home of Kamala Harris, who is head of NASA's Space Council, a duty she manages when she's not, busy being the VP of the liberal world order. And they weren't the reasons for the public gatherings going on recently in places like Martha's Vineyard and Chicago and, every state in this union, and all the craziness that's escalating with all of that stuff.
We have a secure border.
It really feels like the gas is being lit on a new level all the time. Like this troll war for the free world is just in full swing. What with the inflation and the economic bubbles that are just expanding to levels beyond what was in 2008. We have the manufactured energy crisis going on in Europe. And then we just have the death of Queen Lizzie. And finally, about to once again totally go to the moon, fueled by woke pixie dust and galactic rainbow dreams.
It may be back to the drawing board for the NASA crew working on the Artemis 1 rocket. There may still be a leak in the space launch system.
So there's so many things going on the headlines. It's real easy for something like the announcement of NASA's new Earth Observatory system and corresponding Earth Information Center down on the ground. It's easy to get missed in all the commotion, so I felt like it was my duty to bring it to the public's attention. So they're talking about a 4D map of the entire Earth where all the important climate data from the super real globe is being put together in a giant computer model, which of course is 100% real digital reflection of everything really going on the surface, without question. And to think that such a computer model could be arbitrarily created in its digital form first would be absurd and a conspiracy theory. So all you need to know is that we're definitely collecting all this important climate change data from NASA, and it's being fed to whoever their unspecified corporate partners are. And it's all being done in order to help the hardworking farmers out there who can now consult their tablets in the field and find out how much horrible earth-killing, carbon-producing farm work they're actually permitted to do on their own land. Thanks, NASA. I did get a pretty good laugh from that ad-libbed filler part from the Veep there. I guess you gotta just try and take the laughs where you can get them sometimes, because the number of macro scale machinations that are increasingly slamming into Main Street realities are growing by the day. And it's crazy to see how propaganda serves different functions at different phases of the desired social change, kind of depending on whether it demands chaotic upheaval or docile consumerist, malaise. Or better yet, it seems like sometimes both at the same time, frighteningly enough. And even the same flow of propaganda, or the same overarching meta narrative, in this case, space travel and the globe model, it can serve on one level as a type of soma, or a fantasy-based escapist narrative, mainly in the form of entertainment in Hollywood and everything. But simultaneously, and more frighteningly, serve as the underlying ideological framework for subjugating the entire worldwide population to levels of control that would have been inconceivable to any previous generation.
Inside Google, a team of techies has been working behind the scenes on software for high-speed communications networks that extend from land to space. Codenamed Minkowski within Google, the secret project is being unveiled to the public on Monday as a new spin-out called Allyria. While Google declined to offer details about Allyria, such as how long it's been working on the technology and how many employees are joining the startup, Allyria said in a news release that its mission is to manage hyperfast, ultra-secure, and highly complex communications networks that span land, sea, air, near space, and deep space. The company says it has a laser communications technology on an exponentially greater scale and speed than anything that exists today. Allyria's software platform has been used in multiple aerospace networking projects for Google. The spin-out comes as Google parent Alphabet reckons with a slowdown in ad spending and looks to advance or wind down experimental projects. Allyria said it has an $8.7 million commercial contract with the U.S. Defense Innovation Unit. The company will be led by CEO Chris Taylor, a national security expert who has led other companies that have worked with the government. Allyria's board of advisors includes several previous Google employees and executives, as well as Vint Cerf, Google's chief internet evangelist, who's known as one of the fathers of the web. Google will retain a minority stake in Allyria but declined to say how much it owns and how much outside funding the company has raised. Google said that earlier this year it transferred nearly a decade's worth of intellectual property, patents and physical assets, including office space, to Allyria. Allyria's light laser technology, which it calls Tight Beam, claims to keep data intact through the atmosphere and weather and offers connectivity where no supporting infrastructure exists. Tight Beam radically improves satellite communications, Wi-Fi on planes and ships, and cellular connectivity everywhere, the company said.
So yeah, I'm not sure what this Allyria company that Google is quietly rolling out, if that actually ties into this Earth observatory system nonsense from NASA or not, but they did mention space data and space communications, deep space and near space, so I don't know, it seemed like something worth paying attention to in conjunction with the NASA Earth observatory stuff, as it kind of ties into the same climate change panopticon narrative. But that's what we see, time and time again, right? Where all the so-called conspiracy theories, what they really boil down to in the end is just, a very simple, unpalatable conclusion that, in some fashion or another, it's just some group of intellectual, economic, or political elites are in fact okay with deceiving the broader population in ways that is not genuinely for their benefit. I mean, it's pretty we don't think of this as conspiracy theory at all when we see it going on in other totalitarian regimes and historical instances, but when it's in your own country or your own time period or your own paradigm that you don't think is possible, then suddenly it's conspiracy theory. But it's the same basic collaboration of ideological people towards a certain end. And so when you define it in such a basic way, it does hardly seem like something we should be scoffing at. And that was the whole level of quote-unquote conspiracy, which Francis Schaeffer outlined and was warning against in that message from 4 decades ago. Not sure exactly which year it was, but it was either late 70s or early 80s, it seems like. And I played that video in its entirety. It's called The Watershed of the Evangelical World. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, feel free to go back and do that now if you want. But I'll try and summarize it as best as I can. the points that I thought were so applicable and imperative for us to take to heart in the days that we're, living in today. And before his death in the early 80s, he died in 83, Schaeffer had it was a pretty blunt message for the evangelical church in America. And he does say evangelical for lack of a better term, even then. And of course today, that, like so many other terms, it's become politicized and weaponized, and who knows what it means to 100 different people. But in the sense that he meant it then, in the original theological term, what he was talking about was just people who claimed to just believe the Bible. And it was sort of an interdenominational term for Bible believers. And his whole message was about having a high view of Scripture to be ready for the difficult days that are ahead. And in that message, the watershed for the evangelical world, he comes out saying that Christianity and biblical values are no longer the status quo. In retrospect, this should not really seem like a very profound statement for anyone to be making at that point in history, especially in America, but yet it was pretty much that point that Schaeffer spent so much of his time in his books and his talks trying to explain in terms of this existential leap between like what he describes as these lower and upper floors of like a metaphorical house. And so the concept of the existential methodology or theology was really what kind of started to open my own eyes in a lot of ways and help me to just more realistically understand like the real world that I was actually living in and that I'd actually grown up in, and that was increasingly going down this progressive path, both inside the church and in the, the quote unquote secular world around us all. And so even though I'd grown up in church, it wasn't until I was about 19 or 20 that I started to think about the types of things that Schaeffer explores, and especially on such a multi-generational level where, he would kind of track the shifts from academia and the philosophers and the theologians and the Renaissance and all that, and then down through this elaborate historical network of increasingly liberal disseminations of these humanistic ideologies until it reached a point where the majority of the population in the once known free Western civilization is sort of operating under this torturous tension. There's a clash between the upper and lower stories in this existential dichotomy. And you can kind of understand this depending on whether you're talking about people who profess to be Christians or people who are complete atheists and yet still living in this Western society and inheriting all these freedoms and these secondary cultural benefits that Schaeffer describes as coming from a foundation of the Protestant Reformation and true, Bible believers, generations of Bible believers grappling with law and commerce and everything. And I think Schaeffer really kind of grasps this in a way that probably was unique to almost any other prominent Christian voices of that time period in America, was because he had spent so much time in Europe and lived there for however many years, and was very cognizant of how that shift had already taken place in Europe, and how he saw the writing on the wall with so many things, and was acutely aware of what was going on with communism and the Cultural Revolution of the 60s, and just that alone was something that was just so refreshing that it was wow, here's somebody who's taking a critical view of the culture that we live in and the times that we're living in. And it was kind of this amazing revelation that there was. But the conclusion that you kind of come from that, as I encountered it 20 years after he had died, was when I kind of encountered his writings and ideas, was that, yeah, we're essentially a society that's running on moral fumes, because we want to enjoy freedoms that essentially are derived from biblical reality, whether it's freedom of speech, the sacred rights of the individual and all this stuff. And these are all basically derived from biblical teaching, the gospel itself, I would argue. But once that foundation is lost, they don't mean anything anymore. And that's kind of what he was getting at when he talks about getting to the point where there's nothing left except statistical averages. When God has been shoved up into this upper story, as he put it, to where, that's just a religious idea. It has to do with your personal faith and feelings and whatever, but it's separate, and it's not allowed to come down into this lower story of reason, where it pertains to actual real history and the real cosmos. The things that science thinks are its purview. now where we see it completely compartmentalized, and there's this dichotomy. Religion is not allowed into the realm of science. And science can say whatever it wants about religion. That's kind of the cultural dichotomy of this two-story picture. But he's also talking about it in terms of the individual Christians who, this is what was kind of mind-blowing for me 20 plus years ago, was realizing like how you can think that you believe in the Bible, and yet you have been split into this two-story kind of thing without even necessarily realizing it. And it's crazy how, like, I had never even heard that message, the watershed of the evangelical world. I'd never heard that particular one until just a few weeks ago. And it's really good. If you didn't listen to it, I do recommend it, because it kind of summarizes the journey, I suppose, that I've been on for over 2 decades in my own life, of having God really unpack what that even means in my own life and worldview, and being challenged on how much do you really believe the Bible, or is it just religious concepts that you think you believe, but when they're tested and it's fleshed out in the real world, or when you're presented with ways of questioning literal interpretation of the Bible that you never even imagined could be posed, I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah. So I suppose at this point, I'm trying to learn to just surrender to that whole ongoing process of being challenged, and to learn what it means to have a high value of Scripture, in the sense that the way that I live my life on a day-to-day basis is because I believe everything that went on from Genesis to Revelation, Genesis to the flood, to the Exodus, to the Messiah, was absolutely 100% as historically, factually, cosmologically real as what I'm doing right now, and wherever you're sitting and listening to this right now, and everything else that's going on in the world. It is absolutely exactly that real. I know I don't live in that kind of acuteness anywhere near as much as I long to. But without it, I mean, that's what's amazing. So, as kind of a weird random example, a couple weeks ago, I recently watched the Michael Moore produced film. It's called Planet of the Humans. It was actually completely made by this other guy, Jeff Gibbs, and I think Moore just basically like produced it and promoted it, I don't know, after the fact or something, but put his name on it, and it got a lot of attention. It came out in 2020, and probably a lot of you have already seen it. So I hadn't, but overall I thought it was a pretty good documentary, in the sense that it does an impressive job at like demonstrating how the entire, corporate green energy movement is, shockingly one giant scam, and ultimately consumes just as much petroleum in the end, and rare earth mining, and all the so-called, dirty fossil fuels, if not more than conventional energy production. But even more sickeningly, it is now apparently involving the literal burning of timber in order to produce electricity, and labeling it as sustainable biomass fuel. And I had never seen anything about that, so that was some new information. But the thing that really struck me the most overall after watching this documentary was just how bleak and depressing and borderline suicidal even that this might make somebody who is watching this from the perspective of, somebody who believes that, yeah, this is all there is. This is all there is to fight for and to hope for. And, in the framework of believing in the evolutionary universe, yeah, this would be a pretty devastating realization to come to, when there is no other outside person or thing or reality to put your hope into. If there's just man, and this is what man has accomplished, and this is what the environmentalist movement has ultimately accomplished, is nothing but more of the same destruction and virtue signaling and corruption. And yeah, it's a sick joke. At the end of this movie, it's just showing like this orangutan climbing in the dead tree, and I kind of took that to be symbolic of a greater metaphor here that they're making about humans, and humans coming from the animal kingdom, being part of the animal kingdom, and ultimately having nothing which sets us apart or makes us any more special or unique or valuable than anything else in the animal kingdom or anything else in the cosmos, really. You know, so many people tend to react to the message of the Bible, particularly what it says about the end of history and about God judging the world and bringing a final conclusion to human history, as being, you know, doom and gloom and, you know, and just preaching death and destruction and all that. But it's amazing when you just step back and look at the entire environmentalist message from the 60s till today. You know, you can see what doom and gloom really looks like, and why, man, yeah, we're not they've literally been talking about the end of the world, the destruction of life as we know it for decades now, and they keep kind of kicking the can further ahead by 10 years, every 10 years or so. But even this idea of a satellite system that can record information from space about the Earth and tell us all about the environment and help us manage all of our resources. And even that is something they've been doing since the 70s as well.
Newest weapon in the war on insects, and indeed a significant development in agriculture today, is the rapidly emerging science of remote sensing, which means getting information about things from a distance.
You see, radiation generated by the atomic and molecular activity of matter streams from every object in the universe, and it varies according to the condition of the object. For example, each soil condition, every plant, and every body of water has unique and measurable reflectance conditions. In remote sensing, we measure reflectance under various conditions at various altitudes, at ground level, and with different films and sensors. When we put this all together, we establish a kind of basic ground truth, the normal circumstance. After that, we can identify variations from normal by comparing films, analyzing the data, and by making computer readouts.
Here is an ordinary aerial photograph of a test site for the Space Agency's Earth Resources Program. Note the drab brown color of the foliage, which would seem to indicate that much of it was dead. Now, we have changed to infrared film, which tells a different story. The pink and red areas are living things. The green areas are dead vegetation. Note the gradations in color. To the remote sensors, they indicate clearly different kinds of trees, soil conditions, degrees of water pollution, the presence of insects and diseases, and other vital information. Here's a stand of Monterey cypress seen from above as it would appear to the eye. Everything normal and healthy. Note, however, a fungus infection already has a good start, indicated by the green areas. Here's an infrared picture of pollution. The pale blue area is silt, washed into the Gulf of Mexico from the Rio Grande River after a hurricane. Soon to come, remote sensing pictures from an experimental Earth Resources research satellite. This infrared picture was taken over the Imperial Valley of California at an altitude of 129 miles as part of the Apollo 9 Earth Resources survey experiment. There is no question that remote sensing opens a new era in agricultural research that can have vast implications for the 70s. In the worldwide struggle to provide the 55 grams of mixed proteins a day the average human being needs to survive, we can look for some dramatic breakthroughs in the 70s.
For me, I really like corn.
What do you like about corn?
It's corn. A good corn that knobs. It has the juice. It has the juice. I can't imagine a more beautiful thing. It's corn. I can tell you all about it. I mean, look at this thing. When I tried it, I don't anything change. It's corn.
So in the end, Planet of the Humans, while doing a great job at pointing out so many of the hypocrisies and downsides of industrial-grade green energy, it ultimately fails by reinforcing the disgusting globalist lie of overpopulation, and leaves the viewer with really no answers at all, and just the basic awareness of this bleak situation because there's just too many people. And the title of the film itself kind of reinforces that final message, and I was pretty blown away. Like, that's amazing that you get so many things right and then leaves you in that lower story of despair and meaninglessness and hopelessness, you know, the final destination of that existential leap into the abyss of humanistic idolatry. And so the climate crisis now is revealing itself to be the very transparent power grab that individuals like Schaefer were talking about. We're now in a social climate with how many generations now being embraced in postmodernism and relativism, to the point where words hardly even mean anything anymore and can be abused and redefined and weaponized, and yeah, it's like straight out of 1984. Perhaps the only twist that wasn't even really envisioned back then was the role of the internet and surveillance and AI and algorithms that shape human perception on a level that we probably can't even comprehend already. But the elites, quote-unquote, are simply the people who are being used by the enemy to further his lies, and the higher up in the hierarchy you go, and the more you're willing to sell your soul, the more temporary profit you stand to gain in this whole charade, which clearly is designed to destroy the borders, just like they see on the ISS, with 12 sunrises and sunsets every day. They see the big blue marble, all one world. I mean, that's the whole message of the globe. It is a symbol of a one-world system, because the climate is all interchangeable and doesn't respect borders, and communicable diseases don't respect borders, so who needs borders? We just need the best and the brightest, the most evolved among us. This is what people don't understand about evolutionary theory. Like, at its core, it is elitist. You can't believe in evolution and not believe in the concept of the most intelligent, most evolved, most adept humans. But at the same time, you can't complain about being treated like an animal when you believe that that's what we all are. It's the craziest. The more I just think about, you know, the basic teachings of evolution as time goes on, and what a crazy religion it really is. What a crazy psyop it really is. That so many other things are just predicated upon to where we don't even think about what people really mean when they just say science, and how that really translates into how you're supposed to view yourself and view society. When I really stop and think about like what that must be like for people to walk around in their day-to-day lives and really think that they're just some hive of organisms that are growing like bacteria on this spinning object in a vacuum, that horrifies me now. It's so bizarre to even comprehend it. But so it functions to, feed the delusions of the elites and the powerful, and it serves to feed the despair and the dehumanization of the everyday person. So how are you going to end up with anything but totalitarianism of some form or another? But this climate cult, man, this is crazy stuff. So
in the early church, the authority rested on the Bible alone. But in the Middle Ages, there gradually had come a change, with the authority divided between the Bible and the church. Then came Thomas Aquinas, a Dominican monk. He was the outstanding theologian of that period, and his thinking still has much influence. He had an incomplete view of the fall of man, as man had revolted against God. In his view, the human will was fallen or corrupted, but the intellect was not. As a result of this emphasis, gradually philosophy began to act in an increasingly independent, autonomous manner. More and more, the teachings of the Bible and those of the classical non-Christian philosophers were freely mixed. He reintroduced the teaching of the Greek philosopher Aristotle, although Pope Urban IV had previously forbidden it. Because Aquinas emphasized Aristotle, a problem was raised which later became crucial in the humanistic elements of the Renaissance. Aristotle emphasized the individual things around us, the particulars. This cot is a particular. The molecules which make up this cot are particulars, and you and I are particulars. Beginning from man alone, and from the individual things in the world, that is the particulars, the problem then is how to find an ultimate and adequate meaning for the individual things. And most important, how to find a meaning for man and for life. And what will be man's basis for morals, value, and law. Later, the mixture of biblical teaching and non-Christian philosophy led to the question, is the Bible really necessary? Since truth could seemingly be reached without it. What has happened, of course, is that Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages has opened the floodgates in his emphasis on Aristotle and on the particulars. And as this is done, philosophy is increasingly made free from anything that God has said. And as such, we find that man begins to take over and place himself at the center.
A serious look at the year 2000 by distinguished agricultural scientists and engineers sponsored by the Ford Motor Company saw the farm of the future raising fast-growing plants in computer-controlled environments under huge plastic domes. In the high-rise cattle barn, each animal lives and grows on his own personal computer program. The food he eats, the water he drinks, the air he breathes will be measured and managed. The standard farm tractor will probably be powered electrically. In the air-conditioned cab, the farmer can maneuver himself around for better visibility. Carry his lunch in the refrigerator, brew a cup of coffee, or check the progress of operations elsewhere on a TV set. In some operations, he'll choose to use his helicopter hovercraft, the successor to the pickup truck. Today, one man working the land provides food and fibers for 42, who are then free to work in the arts and sciences and productive systems which create the better worlds of tomorrow.
I am gay. I am my authentic self.
I am a queer woman.
I am a transgender woman.
I am a lesbian.
I am gay and I'm my authentic self.
I'm a parent of a transgender son and I'm very proud of it.
I knew I wanted to be in science ever since I was a little kid. I felt that it was really important to be my most authentic self, especially knowing that this was my dream. Queer people can dream big.
Exploration needs to be for everybody. Every person, every kid, if they can see themselves, the astronauts that we send out in space, but also in the teams that make that possible, then we're doing our job. We're doing incredibly difficult and complicated things. We want people that look at things from a different perspective, that can bring us, new ways of solving problems, and diverse and inclusive teams do that.
If someone is in the closet and they see people like me doing our jobs, being effective at our jobs, I think that is the biggest encouragement that I can give them, is to show I can be my true self and I can do my job. They accept me 100%. We're all together working on this.
Who I am is enough. And when you resonate that kind of pride within yourself and then you exude the love that you have for yourself, before you know it, you've got a tribe of people who are just motivating and uplifting one another. That comes from being your authentic self. There's someone in the world struggling like you who needs to see someone like you to keep going. There's someone who needs an example, and you can be that.
I am non-binary. I am gay. I use they, them. There was one instance where I was participating in a candidate lunch, and they actually also used they, them pronouns. And it just felt really nice to see someone else in the room using those pronouns, and I made sure to introduce myself with my pronouns so that they could know. you're not the only one here. There's someone here who understands you and really just wants the best for you.
It requires some bravery, but take the leap. Just be honest, be yourself. And if you are yourself and they accept you, then you've found what you need. I've learned how to be confident myself, and I've also sort of established myself here. People know me. I get to work with smart and capable people, and our job is to explore outer space and to uncover the mysteries of the solar system as a daily matter. That's what we do each day.
I feel hopeful for the future because of the education that's out there and employee resource groups that NASA has established. I am my true self, in love with my wife, and if we can be ourselves, our mission here at NASA becomes more effective.
We're all different, and we should all accept each other for our differences, because that's what makes us special.
It's really important that we can show that visibility is safe, and that you can absolutely be a part of the team and loved and valued for who you are.
It's never too late to be yourself. It's never too late to find your happiness.
No matter what your identity is in the community, that there's going to be a place for you, and there's going to be a place for you to not only just be here, but to succeed and to thrive. I am a queer woman, and I am NASA.
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 Undiscovered and unrealized opportunity. So our task then, and our responsibility, dare I say, is to work together to guide humanity forward into this new frontier and to make real the incredible potential of space for all. May God bless you, and may God bless America.